Today's episode of the Rough Drafts Podcast is brought to you by the newly updated sportsbook at unicorn.com. Unicorn has been a sponsor since the beginning, and this is honestly the best looking and most convenient the site has ever really been. Their new TV guide style layout has made finding and betting a breeze, and with a newly designed and intuitive bet slip, all the information and even access to multi-bets are at your fingertips. I've already gotten started with my LPL and LCK outrights, and even though it's only been a day into the regular season, KT has already let me down, but Unicorn won't. So check out unicorn.com, the world's premier esports betting site. Hello Internet, my name is Walter Ceades Fedczuk, and welcome to Week 4 of our 2017 Summer Split EULCS Guess the Lines podcast with no lines. Because Unicorn doesn't have them updated yet, but that's fine. We're going to give the people what they want. We're just going to do the same thing as last week. We're going to go through all the games. We're just going to talk a little bit more about the teams and have a Just the Lines episode a little later on in the week. It's probably going to be the same, probably Wednesday afternoon, early Thursday morning for our European listeners. But of course, since we're talking about Europe, I do need to bring in my good friend, co-host, and the Rough Drafts European LCS expert, Chase, RedShirtKing Wassenar. Chase, how are you doing on this wonderful, wonderful morning?
Well, you know what? The lines might not be ready, but I am ready to talk about this week because this was a week in which, for I think the first time this entire year, we saw 3 upsets in Europe in the same week. And these were not like little upsets where it's like, oh yeah, Unicorns of Love beat H2K and they were kind of even, but technically Unicorns of Love were the underdogs. No, these were upsets. These were teams that we did not think were going to be able to pull off victories, pulling off victories. These were teams we expected to do quite well after everything we'd seen, not quite getting there. And I think the way those series broke down, I think is going to be something that will have long-term consequences. It's very easy for people to say, oh, well, it's just one series and, it was kind of weird week, so we can write this off. No, I'm not writing this off. I'm going to look through this and kind of talk about what will probably figure itself out and what's likely to be a sign for the future, because I think a couple teams made some statements that I'm really looking forward to seeing them build on.
That is absolutely a fair statement. And since you're looking forward to watching some of these teams build upon their Week 3 success, who is your up for the week?
My up for this week are teams I gave up on the last episode of this podcast. There were 2 teams that I wrote off. I'm like, I'm done. I give up. I was wrong. I accept this about myself. The first one was Misfits. I was ready to throw in the towel on Misfits. I was ready to admit that putting them at second place was way too optimistic because I thought that they could not do the 3 prongs formula that I thought was going to be their path for success, because it required Ignar to be on point, and he had looked bad up until that point. It required Alfari to really develop into a top-tier team fighter as well as a lane bully, and it required Daku to put the team in a place to succeed with his drafts, where I felt they were lacking. And this week they did all 3 of those things, and they did it against the 3-time defending champs. That's huge. That tells me that they have the ability to, at the very least, do it with a couple of their champions. Ignar looks much better when he has a champion with a hook skill shot. That's something that I think we noticed this week. He was much more consistent than he'd been. Alfari, I still haven't seen him be the team fighter that I'd like him to be on anything other than Renekton. But now we have a champion where we've seen him do it. He did land his stuns in team fights. He was the initiator. He did fulfill that role I was looking for him. And when those 2 things are on point, it gives Power of Evil, who in my opinion is the best mid laner in Europe right now, and Hans Sama, who, man, his Xayah game in Game 3 was super fun to watch. I just love seeing what Misfits did here.
It's amazing what happens when you give him a champion that requires some actual mechanical skill to carry a game. Like, he's actually really good at playing AD carry in League of Legends. Who would have thought?
Who knew?
I don't know.
If only someone had been saying this since week 3 of last split, that someone could have pointed out.
Preseason last split. Calling him the next Forgiven.
That's true.
I'm gonna chalk that one up as a win for me. And since we aren't guessing the lines, that means I win the week, and it's now 4-4 on the year.
Is that how that goes?
Yes, that's how that goes because I'm the one running the scoreboard.
I really should have read the fine print. That's what I'm learning here.
That being said, my up for the week is actually the fans because we're getting Kikis back in the LCS. And that is a Christmas miracle if there ever was a Christmas miracle. The news coming out today that Mysterious Monkeys will be replacing Jisoo and Llama Bear with Amazing and Kikis. And the amazing part, okay, we'll see. He's probably not the worst jungler in Europe at this point. But Kikis in the LCS just makes me feel funny inside because I love watching this guy play. And I can't wait for some top lane AP Shaco because Kikis is amazing and Kikis does weird stuff. And coming into this, he could compete for being one of the top 3 top laners in Europe, I think, straight off of the bat, and give the Mysterious Monkeys another threat because Jisoo wasn't a threat. Kosku surely isn't a threat. And, there's only so much Yuki can do. So this will be interesting. I am slightly worried about Dreams. Again, like my same worry with Ignar, you take away his buddy, his friend, the Korean aspect of it. In Berlin, where we've already had people talk about troubles, getting used to European food, climate, culture, etc., still have those same worries about him. But I do think this does shore up a weak point on Mysterious Monkeys that can hopefully, I don't think they're making the playoffs or anything with this roster, but should solidify them and get them prepared for playing in the relegation tournament and potentially take a series off of someone as we get into the inter-group play.
And I want to point this out because I agree with everything you just said, but I'm even willing to go a step further. I think Kikis does the one thing that they're really lacking, which is he actually understands macro play. Like, say what you will about, whether he is a great leader. Certainly we've seen times in his career where he hasn't wanted to step up into that role, has gotten frustrated in situations he's been in. But the guy has a deep understanding of the game. And the thing that has hurt the Monkeys the most so far, they have a very nice early game, actually. Their mechanics can hold up, especially Llama Bear had shown some promise with that this week. But they didn't know how to convert that into any meaningful objective. Kikis knows how to convert those things to meaningful objectives. If they sit back and listen to him, this is a team that I think they could fight their way out of relegation. They could be better than Vitality. Vitality is not a team that was so overpowering that I think that having that weapon could not close that gap. This is huge for Mysterious Monkeys. And I have been asking for Kikis to come back into the LCS for a while. I did my happy dance already. I will do it again. I'm so glad this
counterpoint.
Okay.
Kosku is garbage tier. So, like, Elements tier, we're not going to mention them in power rankings because they're that bad.
It's a concern. It's a concern, and I understand that. But the hope
I'd say it's a big concern.
If you draw so much attention to your side lanes, because both of them are good, Kosku would be able to play with no pressure on him, and his Talia was below average rather than bad. It's not a great argument. I understand that. But we have seen teams do less with, when you consider, what Vitality as their competition's going to be. It's not like Joko had a great week. It's not like Steelback is looking all that awesome right now. Like, you can get by with one bad player.
Echo Fox would like to say no. Echo Fox would like to prove that is a false statement.
You're not wrong. Let's move on.
Let's move on. Obviously, we're not going to beat up more on Kosku and Mysterious Monkeys, but Chase, what was your down for week 3 of the European LCS?
I honestly had a hard time picking it down because most of the teams that lost this week, I thought that, it was about what the team that won did more than it was about the top teams faltering. It was more teams kind of closing the gap in my mind. But Fnatic, we gotta talk, man. I was really excited about you guys, the way you were playing the split. I felt like there was a consistency that you guys were bringing that I was not expecting from the split. And then you made the worst throw that I have seen in a long time. I mean, you guys were ahead over 10,000 gold after Roccat had stolen this Baron, which you then had 2 more Barons stolen away from you in game 3. And the only way that you were going to lose in game 2 was if Roccat was able to rush down the mid lane, take a tower before you guys were back, push through the inhibitor, and seal the game. And so, for whatever reason, your answer to this was, oh, but I'm sure they won't realize this, and then went and split pushed in the top lane, sent 2 guys to the bot lane to go beat up Faxi, and you got juked. You beat out of your shoes. You were out of position. It was a huge error. Your vision wasn't there. I mean, I don't know. Like, is it just a disrespect? Did you just not believe that Roccat was smart enough to do it? Was it an inability to recognize your loss condition? Did you not understand that your mid tower had been pushed in so much that they could quickly seal it, especially with how late we were in the game and the composition that Roccat had? I don't know what the answer is, but there's no answer that is Fnatic had the cohesive macro play that we expect a team that just took out G2 last week to have. That's, to me, a big concern moving forward. I think that it was evidence of a flaw within the Fnatic system, that even while they're ahead, they weren't able to do the things that you need a team to do to close a team out. The longer you let these games go on, the more time you let enemy teams come up with a way to beat you, that's going to affect you when you play against the best teams. And you know what? You beat G2 in week 2, and this does not take that away. But G2, I am assuming, is going to start ramping themselves back up, is going to start looking like the champs that they were. And you guys right now put your flaws on display as we're about to enter intergroup play. We'll see if you guys, I think teams are going to try to capitalize on it. And you guys are going to have to do significantly better in your shot calling if you don't want to suffer much worse than the kind of loss that you had this week, which was, and let me remind you, a historically bad 10k gold plus throw. That's just, you won while ahead, you lost, I should say, ahead. It's like 7,000 gold. That's absurd. How? Come on, stop it. And I say that as a Roccat fan. Like, I'm really glad as a fan that you screwed that up, but come on now, stop it. That's not how this should work.
I could say something really, really, really mean here. But I'm not going to. I'm going to refrain from it because Chase already knows what I was going to say. My down for the week is consistency at the top of the standings, which that could be a good thing or a bad thing. Like, yeah, it's really boring when all the best teams are just constantly stomping everyone and constantly in the same finals, and it's always the same team, unless you're a TSM fan where it's absolutely wonderful and you're totally okay with it. But over in Europe, we did have 2 weeks where, like, yep, the best teams are the best. Unicorns Love and G2, they're on top. Fnatic is slowly starting to insert themselves into that picture. And then all 3 kind of fell apart and muddled everything back up. I think out of the 3 teams, if I was to rank them, like, most likely to, turn it around, I would put Unicorns of Love at the top. Not because I'm trying to, like, ride the rainbow and keep the magic. I just think that Unicorns of Love lost because their singular play style is, we are going to fight. We are going to fight for every scrap of ground. We are going to fight for every minion. We're going to fight for every objective. We're going to fight for every kill, tower, etc., etc., etc. And when they fall behind, when they continue to lose team fights, they just compound their mistake. They compound all of these losses. When you're down 1,000 gold and then you lose a team fight, now you're down 1,800 gold, and then you lose another one after that, and now you're down 2,200. And where most people would be like, okay, well, just fix your mistakes, like, be more passive, stop fighting. Unicorns of Love it's not can't do that, it's they shouldn't do that, because they are very, very good at team fighting. They are very good in the super skirmish heavy style of play, and it's shown, through multiple splits here that is how they want to play. That is Sheepy's style. That is the Unicorns of Love style. And at the end of the day, the last thing I want them to do is sort of go, well, this isn't working anymore, let's do something different. Like, I want them to fine-tune and hone this style. As you already talked about Fnatic, etc., etc., I'll focus on G2 here, because G2 is just awkward to me. It just seems like they are continuing to go full bore into this. The first 20 minutes don't matter, so let's just keep playing for 35 minutes when that's not quite where the meta is.
I mean, I don't know if I agree with that, because the game that they won in 24 minutes. They were very quick in that game.
Right, but the problem is, like,
the
consistently they're not playing for the early game. Like, they got a lead and they went out and they snapped.
They kept pushing into the enemy jungle to get deep vision when they weren't ready yet. I had the opposite problem. I felt like they were forcing things. I felt like they were so desperate to get that vision in, and they ended up fighting in these choke points, in which they ended up falling really behind. This was like the 15 to 20 minute mark was when we saw this happening. They were really trying to get in there, and you'd see these like 2-man moves, or even just a single man going in there, and Trick would get himself killed, or Mithy would fall down, or they just would kind of funnel in one by one, and they'd get picked off one by one at a time. I think their passiveness was not the problem. Misfits they didn't just sit back and wait for Misfits to beat them. They went in to fights where Misfits were just like, oh, you're out of position, bam, and just slid everything at them.
So this is my point, is that G2 feel very Jekyll and Hyde, where it does go game to game, series to series. The Weldon theory versus the more like early G2, like the very first split that they were in the LCS, where it was this super aggro, constant invading, etc., etc. And they've been at their best where they just pick a style, and that's the style they play all split. We joked last split, like, oh yeah, Weldon, only 30 minutes matters, blah, blah, blah. But like, they were that from game one of the split. This is our style, this is how we're going to play the game, and we're going to force everyone else to play our style. And this split, they don't have this very defined, very cohesive style that they're forcing everyone against them to play. Which is why I think this week's matchup against Unicorns of Love is very, very interesting. But before we get to that one, we have a couple more matchups here in Week 4, starting with Misfits versus Vitality. Now, Chase, Misfits had a very good victory over G2. Vitality had a strong showing against the Mysterious Monkeys and then completely fell flat against H2K. What were your thoughts on Vitality coming out of this past weekend?
You say strong victory over Mysterious Monkeys. I say Nuke Duck solo carrying in one of these games, because the rest of his teammates were not doing anything to really help them in a significant fashion. And, really taking advantage of the fact that Cabashard and Nuke Duck were individually better players than Jisoo and Koskyu. As a coherent team, they looked not very good, especially against H2K. But even in their series against the Monkeys, Joko got caught out of position in weird decisions, because ganks in which he shouldn't have been there. There were decisions that I think where the positioning and the pathing really made sense. I thought that Vander is not necessarily the guy that I was hoping he would be. It feels like he's kind of a step removed. I think the fact that he's kind of forced into laning a little bit longer than he's comfortable with means that by the time he's getting out of that part of the game, he's trying to force plays to kind of make up for that lost time. And I feel like that is hurting them, especially at game 2, where obviously he was on that Galio pick, and I don't really like the Galio support pick all that much anyway, but I did not think that worked out for him. I think Nuke Duck, when he's on LeBlanc, has looked great. He's had a couple champions in which he's looked surprisingly solid, but that Rise was not good. And when he ulted into H2K, like in the middle of the team by himself at the 23-minute mark, has to be one of the best fail plays of the week. I think that was just a mental error, and Steelback just isn't. He got outmatched by Nuclear hard. I mean, Nuclear destroyed him, especially in that Ashe game. So, I mean, overall, like, do I think the Vitality had a strong showing against Mysterious Monkeys? I mean, kinda. They looked like the sloppiest team that's been Mysterious Monkey so far. It wasn't a particularly strong performance to me. I didn't find anything about it to be like, oh man, they had this great macro game that allowed them to just crush this bad team. They played a bad team, and it took them a while to get those closing victories. And I think against H2K, it was, exposed just how weak this team is compared to actually good teams. They're not going anywhere. They're going to now be battling with Mysterious Monkeys to avoid relegation. And I think that it's going to be a lot of fun to see Misfits continue to try to build this new identity for themselves when they match up head to head here. Because this should be a pretty easy win for Misfits.
This should be a pretty solid victory for Misfits, just coming across the board. What do you want to see for Misfits? I know you're saying, creating this new identity. So what is it that you want to see against a much weaker team than G2 and Vitality? Like, what would be the perfect scenario coming out of this week for Misfits?
Well, the perfect scenario involves two players really showing up. Number one, Ignar has to continue to show up, preferably on something other than Thresh and Blitzcrank. It's great that he's very good at those picks. I don't want to minimize the impact they can have on them, but I am concerned when the meta shifts away from some of those champions, or if they start getting banned out against him. We saw like his Tom Kench is starting to fall off a little bit in terms of its positioning. Some of the champions that we've associated him with in the past have not been as good in recent weeks. I want him to get back to that kind of form. I want to see that he can do it on multiple different champions, so I don't have to worry about, in a big series, whether he can just easily be banned out, and then suddenly we have the Ignar that we saw in the first 2 weeks of the split that was struggling to make the plays, because he is their biggest playmaker. He is the guy that initiates a lot of these fights, and they need him to be that guy. I also think that I want to see Maxor continue to improve. I think every week his pathing has gotten a little better. It seems like he's starting to understand better what the team wants him to do. Now, you can argue over how effective he is at that. I think that certainly there are things you can point to and say, is he as good as Kakao was at this point in the season in terms of those kind of mechanical advantages? I'm not sure. I'm actually inclined to say probably. I think his Lee Sin in particular, I think, has been quite solid. He hasn't been the big playmaker, but neither was Kakao. People forget that Kakao's strength was in the number of assists he was getting, not in the kills. He wasn't this kill crazy guy. He was the one that set the Power of Evil in particular up for success, and that's the same thing that's happening here. So I'm pretty confident in that regard that Maxor can fill that role. I want to see him do it on something other than Lee Sin. I think Lee Sin is a comfort pick for him. I think that's something that he will continue to look solid on, but I want him to be able to do it on multiple different champions, the way that Kakao is able to do it on multiple different champions. So those are the two things I think I'm looking for against an opponent like this. There should not be problems for them to accomplish if they are going to be a serious threat for a top tier playoff spot. So they should be able to take care of those things, and I'm very much looking forward to seeing seeing how they're able to execute that. And just because I saw that look when I mentioned that Kakao was not a kill guy, he was the supportive jungler.
And he was a playmaker, yeah.
Kakao's stats were 85, 56, 205. Way more on the assist-heavy side of things, and kind of going on that end. And if you compare
but that still doesn't diminish his role as a playmaker. Like, getting assists as opposed to kills still means he's a playmaker. He's just letting his carries get the goal.
But if you look at what Maxlor is doing right now, he's got about the same ratio of kills to assists, 18, 21, 68, a 4.1 KDA. The kill participations are basically the same. That's what I mean by saying he's fulfilling the same role. He is doing the things
on the exact same champion that Kakao was doing. Yes, this is correct.
Yeah, so he is that guy. I think that there is an instinct that's going to say like, oh, but Kakao had some of these flashier plays because he had that really great Ivern game that I think really stood out in the early game. We haven't seen a game like that from Maxor yet.
Yeah, week 4 is really where Kakao started to turn it on last split. That's where we saw this spike in weeks 4 and 5, where Kakao was going a little kill crazy, but it really was playmaking. It was a lot of insect kicks. It was a lot of setting up plays and setting up his side laners and setting up his mid laner to do all these things. That's just why I gave you the look. Like, you could be a playmaker without taking the kill. You can constantly set up your teammates and give them the gold. And I don't disagree with anything that you're saying about Maxlor. The difference is that towards the end of the split, Kakao kind of fell off because he became very predictable, as Pathan became very predictable. And that is one thing with Maxlor that we need to, wait and see if he does become predictable, see if opposing junglers start to read him very well.
Absolutely.
Which I don't think at any of his previous stops that's necessarily been the case, that he became super predictable. But he did kind of hit a point in the season, and that was kind of where he plateaued for the rest of the season. And then the next year, he, about the midway mark, he hit another, kind of peak, and then that's when he plateaued again. And then, sort of this step, which is fine for a young player.
Yeah.
I'm just not sure that's enough for a team like Misfits that are trying to contend for a title. So I want to see a steeper increase in him.
I think just to close this up and really bounce off of what you just said, I think the reason that we've seen him plateau is because he has actually had some predictability issues, because the one thing that he does better than a lot of other junglers in Europe is he gets his mid laner ahead. That's where he's excelled. He's excelled at setting up Knight when he was playing on Giants. He excelled at the second half of Roccat Split. He set Betsy up, which allowed other things to happen around the map. So I would love to see him work on getting a guy like Alfari ahead, or work on getting Hansama ahead, showing that he could do it, what he does in the mid lane, in the side lanes as well. That would be the next step in evolution for him. I think that would really do a lot in order to mix up that predictability, as you pointed out. So that's what we're going to see. And against Vitality, you should have the freedom to try these things, because I don't think Vitality is a team that can match what Misfits is able to do on a macro or in many ways a micro level.
That is fair. Moving on to Fnatic versus H2K. Chase, earlier you said Power of Evil is the best mid laner in Europe.
Yeah.
Fabivin would like a word with you, sir.
Fabivin can learn how to use his Orianna ult in game 1. Let's talk about that. There were about 5 or 6 different team fights in which he didn't use it because, whatever reason, I guess he was saving it for a rainy day. He wanted to make sure that he could return the Orianna ball at the end of the game and get his full security deposit back from whichever person he rented that Orianna from in that game. It was really surprising just how underwhelming that he was in some of these fights because of that. I think literally I counted, I only saw him use it once in a team fight. Most of the other team fights, he held on to it and just felt like he didn't need to use it, which, you know what, to be fair, they didn't need to use it. They were playing against Vitality, and they absolutely destroyed Vitality. I think that it's very clear who the better team here was. I think, we had our typical series of game 1, Jankos is kind of slower to get going, but game 2, he turns it on. He had that 7-1-4 Kazakhs game because Jankos is really good at League of Legends. I continue to think that Nuclear is very good at League of Legends. I thought the Desire was good. The numbers aren't going to necessarily represent just how impactful that was in the laning phase, and how good that he has become as an AD carry. And his Ashe game in game 2 was glorious. And Odoamne is still one of my favorite split pushers to watch because he's so damn consistent. He has very good to great games every game. Never necessarily the, oh my god, this is the best top laner in Europe game. But, his Shen ultimates were on point this game. His teleports, his ability to roam around the map, he really took it to Kabashard. You saw it his Fiora game. Didn't necessarily do as much early against the Renekton, but when he turned on, he was a monster. And he did that without having the kind of goal that teams usually throw at a Fiora comp. So, all in all, I really like this H2K team as a whole. I don't think that this was the strongest series that they've ever had. Game 1 in particular, I think there were some very clear overextending mistakes where they just allowed themselves to be caught out, especially by Nuke Duck. Kind of didn't have the vision to see when he was leaving lane and in being able to cut off some of their gank patterns and kind of punish them more than they got out of it. But, H2K is a really good team. The machine is still in place. Every piece of this team individually is still very strong. And the thing about this matchup now is I'm not sure how Fnatic bounces off of them right now. If Fnatic can make those kind of mistakes in the macro game, if they can leave those openings, well, we know H2K are good enough that the system will kind of chug along. The machine is going to have them in a place where they will be able to take team fights and be able to fight in pretty solid play. Fnatic can't make mistakes that that could be capitalized on so easily.
See,
I think they need to be finer tuned than that.
See, I disagree with this because that's where H2K have their problems, is in the macro game, is in the mid to late game. That is where they run into issues. That is always where the machine stalls out. And we aren't seeing teams ban Kennen. We aren't seeing teams take, Reckless off of these super playmaking champions. Like, I think H2K's, path to victory is Odoamne go split push. I absolutely think that is. Let Ceades play a tank, whether it's Gragas, probably not Shen, but let him play something like that and go with a Fiora, go with a Camille, go with a Renekton, and just try to bully Ceades. And make this about the split push, not about the team fight, not about the macro decision. It shouldn't be as brain dead as, we're going to stand over in this corner, we're going to let Odoamne do all the work in this corner and take a tower, and then we're going to swap sides. I don't think H2K wants to get in this heavy macro rotational team fighting play with a team that is as good as Fnatic. I know we look back at last week and we go, Fnatic, they stumbled here, they couldn't figure out how to close that game too. But as I've said before, and plenty of people have said before, at some point, gold leads don't matter. And it does just become one team fight. And that's what I thought that game 2 eventually turned into, was it was one team fight. Rocket was able to turn around, take a whole bunch, and they were able to end the game. I don't think it was necessarily Fnatic making all these compounding mistakes that let Rocket slowly come back into the game. It was a snap team fight. They're off the map for that long. Rocket just turned around the snowball. And
I'm going to staunchly disagree with you on that. There were several skirmishes before that ultimate getting wiped. The fact that Rocket were even able to rush down the Baron in the first place because Fnatic was out of position. The fight before that fight, where it had been in the top lane, and Rocket was able to get away with a 3-for-1 skirmish that made absolutely no sense at the time. The Fnatic had taken that fight on Rocket's territory. When they set up the fight in the river where they had everyone hiding out in the bush, and they had that cohesive engage with Faxi actually hitting his Jarvan ult for once. Like, there were several different ways in which Fnatic made mistakes. And to kind of come to your point, when I talk about I'm not sure about how Fnatic is going to handle the macro game, I'm not saying, oh yeah, H2K are this perfect macro team that are going to take advantage of it. What I'm saying is, the whole reason that I loved Fnatic in this matchup is because they do have the superior macro game. When they are at their best, they can play around the map very deadly. They can have Ceades split push very well. His globals are on point. You can have Caps. He's so good at flanking. He's so good at kind of dictating where these fights are supposed to be. That's how they're better than H2K. If they're making those mistakes, if their macro isn't the game, that it isn't what's deciding the game and determining the pace of it, if there are holes in their strategy, well, then the machine will be allowed to run its course. That's what they cannot afford. It's not going to be H2K is going to come up with this amazing rotational strategy that catches Fnatic off guard. It'll be Fnatic sets the pace with their strategy, but they make mistakes that hinder what they're trying to do, which gives H2K enough time to just run through their operating system and get the Baron that they want and have enough pressure on the map that they want to take that home. So I really feel that Fnatic, what I thought was going to be their biggest strength in the series, ended up kind of falling apart on them last week. And like I said, in multiple different fights, especially game 3. You can't throw 2 Barons. 1 Baron, I understand you had a bad smite proxy, but 2 Barons? Come on. You can't do that. That's a team that's it's more than just one mental error, and you cannot make those against a team like H2K. They're too good. And for the record, Nuclear is a really good League of Legends player right now. So if your whole idea is like, oh, but we know we have the team fight, do you know? Do you know you have the team fight, or do you think that you have the team fight? Because if you're not 100% sure, I can guarantee you Nuclear is 100% sure in himself and in his ability to turn some of these things around. He's got a 6.0 KDA right now. That is the 3rd highest among all 80 carries, 42 kills. Just absolutely looking like a a player on a mission to make a name for himself. And oh, by the way, Che is leading the league in assists because of course Che is. That's what Che does. He's really good at League of Legends. I love this team.
Agree to disagree. If this game goes past 35 minutes, I think Fnatic's chances go way up to win. Agree to disagree. Unless Otoame is on like a Fiora or something where he just split pushes. Moving on, I really don't want to talk too much about this series. Roccat versus Splice. Just because I want to get to the next one because I'm really excited for it. Roccat versus Splice. Anything really like intrigue you outside of I'm just a Roccat fan? Like what is interesting about this series to you?
We just saw Splice pull off a really good upset over the Unicorns of Love, and I'm really excited to see if they can maintain that momentum. So this is exciting, man. Like, I liked this team. I expressed last week's episode that I was frustrated because there was so much clear talent on display, and they weren't making the most out of it. And when Yost made that tweet of like, oh yeah, I'm sure they're going to bounce back in week 4, I was able to laugh like, haha, he sees like, he still thinks Unicorns are going to win, but he is giving Splice some love. And then Splice said, nah, we feel like doing it in week 3, actually. And they looked really good. I think that as a whole, we saw Senkux looked awesome. He has really gone all in on roaming mid laners, and it has freed up this aspect of the game that I think was lacking in his play. It really seems like he's found an identity. His Kassadin was awesome. I loved seeing his Malzahar, which I was not expecting the mid lane Malzahar pick from him, but he continues to show that he does have these kind of unexpected champion picks from time to time. It was great to see that from him. I thought Wonder, oh man, when Wonder can get a lane advantage, he is absolutely deadly. His Kled was great. His Fiora dueled very well in the mid game in game 2, and I think really took it to the Unicorns of Love. And that was the thing about Splice that I think really impressed me. They don't necessarily force fights the way that someone like a Unicorns of Love would force fights. They're not sending 3 or 4 bodies at a skirmish more often than not. But they put so much pressure on the map that the Unicorns had to fight on Splice's terms, essentially. Splice knew, like, this is the objective where we're pushing right now, and we know that Unicorns of Love are going to want to stop it. And because they know that Unicorns of Love are going to stop it, we're going to send the rest of these guys to come back and make sure that we have that second wave of flank and kind of flank the expected engage, get that counter engage going. And I think that was their biggest weapon in this series. It turned fights that Unicorns of Love thought were going to be in their favor, and were able to turn it into fights in which Splice was able to get sizable advantages and really snowball some leads. So I think that it's a very clever way of exploiting a team's strategy. And Unicorns of Love, because they are that we attack all the time team, Splice had an easier time doing it than they have against other teams where they've had to sit back and wait for them to make a mistake that they could see. This time they're like, look, we know what the mistake is that Unicorns of Love are going to make. If they make a mistake, it's going to be that they're going to engage on us when they shouldn't. So let's expect them to engage on us and have the vision down and make sure that we can counter engage. So I really liked it quite a bit. I think it's great to see Kabi looking a little bit better as well. The key here is, are they going to be able to be consistent with it? They need to prove that this is not, this one-off where now we're going to see them go back to this kind of turtle up defensive 35 to 40 minute before we're confident enough to push for a Baron and push for a real victory here. I want to see that same energy, that same map pressure that made them so good in this series, the double split push, the 1-3-1 kind of composition. I want to see them continue to develop that. I want to see them continue to kind of display that. And against Roccat, they should be able to do just that, because it's not like Pride Stalker is going to have some amazing early game that throws off whatever split pushing plan you have.
See, here's the thing. I completely disagree with everything you were saying. Like, I completely disagree with your analysis of that series, because to me, it felt like... I agree with that. Splice was laying in wait, waiting for Unicorns of Love to engage on them. That is the one point I'll concede to you. But I don't think Splice were being proactive. I don't think they were doing anything that was, like, tricking Unicorns of Love into engaging into them. I think they were just waiting for Unicorns of Love to engage. And they built compositions that were later team fight. They wanted to use their spells and abilities after the Unicorns of Love had engaged. When you look at their champion picks, when you look at how they're playing around these fights, we talk about we talk about how Splice is playing things like Cassidon, they're playing Braum, they're playing Twitch, they're playing Gragas, they're playing Fiora. Like, they weren't engaging with Gragas, flash stun ulting. They were waiting for Unicorns of Love to come in, then they were disrupting the fight with the Gragas barrel. They were disrupting the fight with Spray
They were
and Peg.
split pushing. Split pushing is an active decision, an active choice that they were pushing with themselves so that the rest of them could counter-engage later. They were making the proactive play by going for these towers in the first place and hard pushing for them and getting the vision down, and they usually did so aggressively with at least 2 people at a time. It's not the 3 or 4 man skirmish kind of aggressive that we see a Unicorns of Love do, but they weren't sitting back on their laurels. They weren't, power farming and just waiting for an opportunity. They were making opportunities for themselves that Unicorns of Love had to react to, or else Splice were just going to get free towers. I don't think that's fair at all. I mean, that would imply that the only way to be proactive is to look for a team fight. There are many ways to be proactive. Team 1-3-1 compositions are never going to look for the kind of fight that you're describing. That's not what they're built to do. That doesn't make them less proactive. I don't think that's fair.
Okay. I don't think that they're going to be able to play against Roccat like they were, able to play against Unicorns of Love. I think these are 2 very passive teams in the early game, in all honesty. So you say, oh, I don't think Pride Stalker is going to have an early game. Like, yeah, I don't think Trashy is going to have that much of an early game. We don't see these teams making plays in the early game. Their bread and butter is that 25 minutes on where they're team fighting, where they are setting up a split push, where they are doing these other things. But I think this is pretty evenly matched, in all honesty. I think that Splice is probably a little bit more talented across the board, and the fact that Senkux has started to shift towards these more roaming mid laners, that is where his bread and butter is. That is what he should have been playing since the very first moment he stepped into the LCS. He's not an Orianna player. He's not a Syndra player. He is a Taliyah, Cassidon, Aurelion Soul player where he should be roaming around the map. He should be getting out of his lane. He should be stepping into other lanes and roaming around with Trashy. That is when he is at his best. So at the end of the day, like, this series to me could go either way, just depending on how, 3 or 4 team fights go, in all honesty. And if either team came out and had this massive, massive early game where they're, taking towers left and right, they're getting first blood at 3 minutes, like, that would surprise me. This does feel like a 25-30 minute laning phase style, ARAM style game where, 3 or 4 fights are going to determine the series.
Friendly reminder that Splice won Game 3 in 26 minutes, which was a very quick, early game decisive victory. This is not a team that played as slowly as you're insinuating. They won in 33 and 26 minutes. Those are both relatively quick times for victories. They are below average for match times in the EULCS. Right now, the average game is about 35 minutes from what I'm seeing.
Against a team that never stops fighting, and when they're behind, when they lose, team fights compound upon their behindness. So
yeah, but they still have to do enough to get those leads. You have to play with the leads enough around the map to force a game. I mean, we are staunchly disagreeing today.
Yeah, okay.
We're just gonna have to move on. I am surprised with where you came down on Splice, but let's move forward.
I mean, I've been hurt by them too many times, so biggest thing for Splice, I need consistency. I need them to prove last week wasn't a fluke. And
on that we agree.
So far, since the last year, since last summer, they haven't proven that they can consistently perform week to week. But yes, moving on, Unicorns of Love versus G2. To me, the very obvious match of the week.
Oh yeah.
Payback. Unicorns of Love have not looked very good against G2 in the past. Only winning 1 game against them in Hamburg, in their home arena, in their home city. Chase, what is this series going to come down to?
I mean, this series is going to come down to which one of these teams. Really, it's going to come down to whether G2 can shore up the weaknesses that we saw in the last 2 weeks. Because once is an outlier, twice is a trend, 3 times, and we'd have to start talking about this being a serious problem that is going to come back to haunt this G2 team, because there just aren't that many weeks in an EULCS split. They only play 13 series. If they lost a 3rd series, it's very possible that that alone might take them out of contention for the 1 seed if either Fnatic or Misfits was able to take care of business moving forward. They do not want to be in that spot. Both of these teams want to be in control of their own destiny in terms of being able to take that number 1 seed, and they need to win this week in order to be 100% certain in that. So I think there's a lot on the line, and certainly for Unicorns of Love, I think there are a lot of, this would be the monkey off their back, right? This would be, the idea that, like, look, even though G2 has this macro-oriented playstyle, it doesn't mean that we can't beat them. We just have to be smarter about the way that we set up these fights, the way that we pick the compositions that are going to put us in that position to succeed, and really using those tools effectively. For G2, the two things that I need to see, number one, I need to see Trick feel comfortable with where pathing is right now. I think that the early emphasis on Rift Herald has thrown off his previous plan. I don't think he's as comfortable right now in terms of what the enemy team is doing, in terms of where he needs to be on the map, especially in the 10 to 15 minute mark. And he's being caught out of position. And I think he's just not taking advantage of, the enemy team the way that he usually does. I mean, to put this in perspective, we always brought up that 56.3% jungle control that we saw last split. Like, that was the key with G2. This season, it's 49.8. It is below 50% right now in terms of jungle control. That's a huge change. That is a systematic change that is going to come back and potentially bite this team in the butt if we're expecting them to be this macro dominant team. Controlling the jungle was a big reason why they were able to do that. So Trick needs to step up. And the other thing that they need to do is they need to find a way to balance this newfound love of the early game, which I'm glad is there. I think that gives them a more well-rounded approach. But they cannot lose sight of why they were making some of these more passive decisions in the first place. There's a logic to, we need to pick our moments. We need to pick when we really want to invest in warding. We need to see what the enemy team is doing and take advantage of their back timing, take advantage of some of their overextensions, and then get the deep vision, then capitalize when we take those towers and kind of get the fundamentals down. If you're rushing the fundamentals, teams can punish you. That's what Misfits did last week. That's what Fnatic did in week 2. G2 had holes in their fundamentals and teams punished them for it. Unicorns of Love are one of the most punishing teams in the league if you leave yourself open to macro errors, because they are going to run at you and take advantage of it before you even realize the mistake that you've made. And G2 has had such a hold of the fundamentals that the Unicorns of Love haven't been able to do that. They're usually stuck having to play this slowed down game, which makes the Unicorns of Love uncomfortable. They kind of end up trying to force things to make it more at their speed, and then things kind of fall apart. But G2 hasn't looked like a team that's capable of controlling the tempo in that way right now. And that is a huge concern if you are a G2 fan. I think that this is one of those things where you have to wonder, like, are they rusty, or is there a problem now on this patch that's really coming back to haunt them? And I think a lot of that's going to come down to Trick. I think if Trick returns to form, this team's going to look like the team that are 3-time champs. If he doesn't, Unicorns of Love might take a win for the first time. And it certainly would feel overdue for the Unicorns of Love fans. The Love Hurts crew would love nothing more than to be able to pop off after a victory in this one. So a lot on the line here.
This definitely feels like a Unicorns of Love win. But this also feels like the clever swerve where G2 is like looking like a wounded animal, and then they strike out and they just quickly 2-0 Unicorns of Love. And then we're all going like, oh, well, I guess G2 just has Unicorns of Love number, and it's going to set up once again this like great series in the playoffs where it's like Unicorns of Love can't beat G2. Feels like it's almost scripted, like there's going to be this enormous payoff at some point. And I want it to happen in the playoffs for Unicorns of Love, but at the same time, like, this is probably the most wounded G2 has ever been playing against the Unicorns of Love. And UOL really needs to snap on this moment. And I do agree with your assessment that it really does revolve around Trick. I don't think Perkz is playing bad. I don't think Expect is playing bad. I don't think the bot lane... I think the bot lane is playing better than they did in the spring. So it comes down to, well, Trick is the one who is really kind of off his game, and some of it feels like the champion choices just don't suit him. Some of it feels like the jungle pathing just doesn't suit him. And Xerxes and Vizicachi have gotten better as a duo. They are the Bash brothers. Like, I dubbed that on Dardoch and Flame last split, but I totally just overlooked Xerxes and Vizicachi. Those two guys are the Bash brothers. Samux is coming up, and he's like the little chubby black kid that had the knuckle puck. in Mighty Ducks 2 that was, on the streets or whatever. Like, he's that guy. And then, you got the rest of the team that rounds it out. And Exile really feels like the weakness to me currently. But it's not a weakness that I don't think can be overcome or that I don't think can be adjusted. And then we'll be talking about how Illusog and his weird champion pool might be the weakness again. I just think Exile is feeling a little frustrated with the meta. And I think he needs to adjust to it. I think he needs to get, pull what Senkux is doing. And, I like the fact that he played Ryze. I like the fact that he's trying to play more kind of roaming style mid laners. I think that really plays well to what Unicorns of Love and him want to accomplish. I really don't want to see him on Syndra or Orianna much. I'd much rather see Talia. I'd really love to see him learn how to play Aurelion Sol. I think that would fit him pretty perfectly as well. I'm very, very interested in the line on this one from Unicorn when it comes out. I got this one circled really, really heavily, and I'll be interested to see where they do come down on it. Any last thoughts on the series?
Yeah, I want to play everyone's favorite game show. Guess which player I'm talking about with 2 junglers right now. You're probably figuring out where I'm going with this, but I'm going to give you 2 of them. Let's start with player 1. Or we'll call player A to keep things clear.
Okay.
12, 21, and 36 for a 2.3 KDA. 67.6% kill participation. Negative 79 gold differential at 10 minutes, and 291 damage per minute, 205.3 earned gold per minute.
Okay.
Player B, 22, 25, and 49 for a 2.8 KDA, 65.7% kill participation, negative 31 gold differential at 10 minutes, 273 damage per minute, 218.6 earned gold per minute. So at the very least, we could tell like those are 2 relatively close junglers, both of whom are struggling so far this split in pretty much all of these stats. So who is player A and who is player B?
Player A is Lilex, player B is Trick.
Lulex's stats are actually kind of incredible. He had 11.52 in these 3 games.
I thought that was where you were going with it.
It's not, but so you said player B was Trick.
Yes.
Player A is Trick.
Okay.
Player B was Pridestalker. Pridestalker actually has a better KDA, slightly worse kill participation, but better gold differential, better earned gold per minute right now than Trick. I want to repeat that. Pridestalker is ahead in several significant categories that we are used to seeing Trick excel in, than Trick. I consider this a concern. I think this is a concern to me. I don't know how we got here, but Trick, if you want to return back to your form at any time, I think we would all appreciate it. European fans miss you, buddy. Get your head in the game. Come on now.
That's fair. Moving on, the last 2 series, our Saturday series. Chase, which team is more likely to get which team is going to get their first map win? Just period. I don't think in either of these series, but which team is more likely to win a map first? Mysterious Monkeys or Ninjas in Pajamas?
I would say the Mysterious Monkeys because they're now on Kikis. And Kikis can single-handedly win a game with his split pushing in the right moment. Guy has a very good understanding of the map and how to take advantage of laning in matchups. He was absolutely dominant in Challenger Series last split. I think, it's very easy to hype up a player for being very good in Challenger. He was a whole nother level of dominance. I think like a 7.5 KDA when you look at the regular season stats alone. Guy's a monster. He's going to continue to be a monster. And I think that's going to give Mysterious Monkeys an advantage that Ninjas in Pajamas don't have right now, because Ninjas in Pajamas don't have anyone who understands how to really initiate the fights that they need after 15 minutes. It was just kind of sad to watch their series against Roccat. You have Prophet, who's really good at split pushing. I'm going to continue to be a defender of Prophet. I think he has one skill set that he is utilizing. And I think that if you look at, well, why isn't he playing more team fighters? Why isn't he doing more to help the team? Who is he there to help? Is it Hiku? I don't think Hiku is an AD carry that's going to reward you for investing in him. I don't think Shook is a jungler that's clearly proving himself as being someone that is worth getting ahead and trying to snowball advantages with. And I certainly don't think that Magne is doing enough in the mid to late game to justify that. The best thing I could say for Ninjas in Pajamas is they actually had a pretty good Rift Herald usage in game 2. Everything else about them is just really sloppy, really poor choices. And unfortunately, I don't see who on the team is going to step up and be better in that regard. Whereas Mysterious Monkeys have now given them a tool that should be better in that regard. We should see more from them as far as their playmaking, because now they have 2 guys who actually know what they're doing. Say what you will about Amazing, at least he's a veteran. At least he understands how the pace of these games should go. And, you could say, oh, but Shook is a veteran too. And I'm like, yeah, but, I mean, let's be honest, guys. How often did you notice Shook was on the map this season? How many times? He had 1 good Lee Sin game. I actually want to give him credit for that because I know someone's going to bring this up. He had 1 good Lee Sin game
Sounds like Shook.
Against Roccat. And that's it. And in that Lee Sin game, I remember thinking to myself, like, this is okay, and it's not enough to beat up on Pride Stalker. That's where we are with him at this point in his career.
I don't want to go back to Roccat. You're really down on Pride Stalker? I think he's improved over the 3 weeks that we've played. Like, I think he's getting better. It's slow, but I do think he's getting better. I think your hate is a little unfounded.
Let me be clear
Just
here.
a little.
Pride Stalker in 2018 and on is a guy that I actually like. I think he's growing well. I think this Roccat team in general is growing well. You're going to see in the article that I wrote for unicorn.com this week, I said that I'm really excited for the future of this team, but growth is going to be slow and they're still very raw and it's going to take time. Faxi is going to take time. Pride Stalker in particular is going to take a lot of time. He still is making very, beginner style mistakes for the LCS stage, but he's going to iron out the kinks. But my point is, this is a guy who is raw, who needs time, who's still figuring these things out. If you're not up to his level, when he is a rookie that is still trying to put his LCS career together, if you can't do that, you are failing. You are failing as what you're trying to accomplish in this league. And when you're a veteran like Shook, you cannot be worse than a guy who's on his 4th series in LCS history. You can't do that. You can't do that and then tell me I need to take you seriously as a jungler. You have to be better than that. And right now, like, Pride Stalker is going to keep improving. Shook is who he is at this point in his career. That's the difference. So if I'm comparing you to him now, that's not a great sign for your future. That's not what these teams want to be in right now.
Yeah, Shook is not very good. It should tell you something that we're so disinterested in these 2 teams that we decided to talk about Pride Stalker for like 5 minutes. That being said, I do agree with you that it's Mysterious Monkeys, and I think you nailed the point on the head exactly. On Mysterious Monkeys, there's 2 guys. There's 2 guys that could potentially help carry, and it's going to be Kikis and it's going to be Yuki. Like, I do think that it's going to take a little bit for Kikis to get integrated into the team, but he has shown that he can, like, just right off the bat be like, all right, split push champion, let's go. And you have I can't wait to see his Renekton. I can't wait to see his Jarvan. I can't wait for him to pull out something super weird and super janky as a counter, like a top lane Udyr, like Yorick, like something. I don't think he should play Yorick. I don't think Yorick is a good champion at all, and it is kind of a waste of time. But that's the opposite on NIP is I think Profit needs to stop playing these split push champions. I think they need to try and learn how to play as a team. And you aren't going to learn how to actually play as a team if you keep split pushing. If you keep saying, let's send everybody to the far corners of the map and let's just try and do this. I think that's the same problem Vitality has had, and it's compounded on itself of rather than let's just pick team fights. Let's learn how to do this as a team. Let's learn how to be teammates. Let's learn each other's tendencies. Let's actually try and grow our skills in this way. They just said, well, that's what our players are good at, so let's throw caution to the wind and double down on just 45-minute laning phase, and it doesn't work. The problem is your coach is Nico the Pico, and I don't think he's a very intelligent coach. I think he's a pushover, and I think the players are kind of way overwhelming him in terms of what they want to do. If they had a real coach, this might have been a good spot for a Yamato cannon, in all honesty.
Yeah, and let's also remember that I bet a lot of the reason that they're relying on split push compositions is because that way the fact that Prophet's English is probably not all that great at this point isn't nearly as big of a hindrance as it would be otherwise. Having to put him on a teamfight champion requires him to understand what the rest of his team is doing, whereas if he split pushes, he can do what he's good at and kind of do it on his own and just rely on his own individual mechanics and only really has to pay attention when the team desperately needs him to do something and listen to a couple keywords that way. I think that's a shortcut that they're taking. But I think you make a very great point, which is that it's not going to get better if you don't try to figure it out. Against a team like H2K, H2K is going to destroy you if you play the kind of split push comps that you're doing as poorly as you've done them. Because isolating Prophet the way it is, like Jankos will just take that fight every time. They'll go for the 2-on-1 there and then really try to, get the isolation damage on something like a Kha'Zix. They will punish the bot lane super hard. H2K has too many moving pieces that can each carry individually. I think they are going to have to play more team-oriented if they're going to have a chance here. And Mysterious Monkeys, my hope is that Kikis knows enough about Fnatic. He was on that Fnatic Academy team. They scrimmed against Fnatic quite a bit. He understands the Fnatic system. So you're telling me there's a chance. So you're telling me
No. Get out of Wonderland, Alice. That's a bad idea. It's a bad idea. Do not follow this white rabbit. Nope. Not their first series. Not after either Fnatic is going to have figured things out and had a really good series against H2K, or they're going to have gotten crushed by H2K and are going to be pissed off. No. Not going to happen. There's more of a chance of NIP taking a game off of H2K, but it's still pretty low.
Yeah, I don't trust either of those.
I hope all of your chances of liking this podcast were higher than Mysterious Monkey's chances of taking a game off of Fnatic. Like I said, this was just our analysis of the teams, just our thoughts on the games. Lines will be coming probably tomorrow or early in the morning on Thursday, so our European fans can hear our ideas, so you guys can hear our ideas, and make sure you get your bets in on unicorn.com before the games start on Thursday morning. With that being said, you guys can go ahead and subscribe to the podcast or follow it on SoundCloud and YouTube. Just find all the little follow, subscribe buttons underneath the video or wherever it is on SoundCloud. You can also follow us on Twitter at Rough Drafts Pod, and you can follow myself at Ceades_LOL. Chase, where can the good folks at home find you?
You can find me at RedShirtKing, and you can talk to me about anything that I said today. I will read in the comments. I like to get in there and talk to you guys as much as I can. Every once in a while, you guys make interesting comments, I think is the best way to put it, but I love that, it creates a conversation and allows me to kind of think about how I can fine-tune my analysis to better demonstrate my points. So I do love interacting with you guys, even if I don't agree with where you're coming from. Just like I love when we finally have a couple of disagreements on the pod. You and I, we agree too often. We watch enough games together where we sometimes come to the same conclusion. So I am glad that we disagree on some of these teams. I think it'll be very interesting to see which one of us is proven right. If you pay attention to my luck from last week, it'll end up that everything I just said ends up backfiring on me because I finally believed in these teams, and I'm not allowed to have teams that I like or root for or believe are going to be successful have that come true. So let's see. Europe, keep things interesting. Let's keep surprising us. This was fun. I want more weeks like this.
Absolutely. I can totally agree with you that. And with that, we come to the close on our episode, but join us tomorrow where we'll talk about the very fun, the very entertaining North American LCS, where there are two teams at the top of the table that I don't think either of us really saw coming, and a stalwart favorite is also up there as well. So come back tomorrow for that and our Just Alliance for the EULCS Week 4. And until next time, goodbye, Internet. You can follow the Rough Drafts Podcast on all your favorite social media sites. Twitter at Rough Drafts Pod, Facebook.com/Rough Drafts Pod, SoundCloud.com/Esports Rough Drafts, YouTube.com/Rough Drafts Podcast, as well as on iTunes by searching for the Rough Drafts Podcast. The Rough Drafts Podcast is supported by our lovely Patreons at Patreon.com/Rough Drafts Pod. And by viewers like you. Thanks for listening, and goodbye, Internet.